So pretty much everyone has made it out of the prison, we found out, in this episode of The Walking Dead, which was entitled Inmates. The only person that was still in the prison was Glenn, and Tara was just on the outside, in the courtyard area of the prison. Now, I'm a little bit confused, because I know a lot of people are talking about how Tara is more than likely going to end up with Glenn. Maybe it's the fact that I didn't pay too much attention to this particular character during the first half of the season, but I thought Tara was a lesbian. Wasn't she the lesbian? I'm not sure. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe she wasn't, but that's just what I was thinking from the first half of the season. I know that her sister was in love with the governor. I do know that much. But, okay. So, Carol is back, and she picked they did an excellent job in timing this. The producers did an excellent job in timing Carol's arrival, because Tyrese, spoiler alert, Judith is alive. We all kind of suspected that Judith was going to be alive anyway. We just didn't know who had her. I honestly thought that Beth had taken her. I thought that Beth, Lizzie, and Mika would all end up together. But Beth is with Daryl. Horrible pairing. Horrible pairing. And Lizzie and Mika ended up with Tyrese and with baby Judith. Lizzie is probably the one that actually killed Karen. So Tyrese is going to be pretty pissed off when he finds out about that. But Carol took the fall for the fact that Karen was killed. Tyrese does not know this. One of the reasons why Rick sent her away or banished her from the prison was to keep people like his daughter Judith safe. And it's kind of ironic that now Carol is the one that actually ended up saving Judith. Not once, but twice in this episode. Once from the walkers, and once from Lizzie, who is going to try to strangle her to death or smother her. To be fair, though, this is the apocalypse, and Judith is a liability. And let's face it, who wants to grow up in a world surrounded by fear and death all the time? Lori actually didn't want to have the baby in this type of environment. She tried to actually abort the baby at first. So, I mean, come on. Can you blame someone for wanting to kill a baby that's crying constantly? If worse came to worse, and the baby ends up getting fed to the walkers, yeah, it's horrible, it's tragic. I almost sound like a really big dick for saying this. But you gotta do what you gotta do to survive. Now, Lizzie's just batshit crazy, and she's obviously good at murdering people. I'm pretty sure she's a serial killer. But those type of people are dangerous, but Judith can be just as dangerous on the flip side. But glad that Judith is alive. Can't wait for Carl and Rick to find out that Judith is alive, especially Michonne. I think Michonne's actually going to be the happiest out of everyone that Judith is alive. But they were on the railroad, Tyrese, Carol, and the kids. And they came across this band of men that were getting attacked by the walkers. And one man who had been bitten in his neck was, he was dying. He told them that up the railroad tracks, there was a safe place for them. It was perfect for the kids, he said. Take them, it's safe. Go. So they did. They just turned around and walked off and left this guy to turn into a zombie. Now, I know the reason why the producers do this. because they wanted you to react in horror at the fact that Lizzie was going to kill Judith. But then on the juxtaposition, you have Tyrese, all the adults there, Tyrese, Carol, and they don't do anything to help this man that's dying and turning into a zombie. They know that he's certainly going to die and could potentially end up hurting someone else, but they leave him there anyway to do exactly what zombies are going to do. They don't kill him out of mercy. Morality in the post-apocalypse. What do you do in that situation? I think because Carol was very good at killing people for mercy. She was doing it all the time in the prison. Whenever somebody would turn or get ready to turn, she'd shove a knife in their head. She didn't even offer to do that in this situation, which is kind of odd and kind of weird. Maybe she just didn't feel like it was appropriate with Tyrese there. I don't know. That's going to be an interesting situation down the road. It'd be interesting. I think I'd predicted in one of my other videos that Tyrese and Carol would end up finding each other outside the prison, and it would be interesting if they ended up hooking up and falling in love before the truth came out. That would be very interesting. Of course, Lizzie, if Lizzie is the one that's responsible and Carol's taking the fall for it, Lizzie could potentially use the information against Carol. Because she looks like she might be the type that would do something like that. Okay, so they're heading down the railroad, and they come across a sign that invites them to Terminus. It has a map of Terminus, and it says, blah, 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 sanctuary for all. If you arrive, you will survive. And we all know that it's probably not true. Now, Terminus is not a location in the books. This is an entirely novel location for the TV show. There are a couple of locations in the novel where they didn't really have place settings. So it's potentially likely that Terminus was one of these locations in the book, and they just never gave it a name. I mean, it could be where the church was at, where we will run into Gabriel Stokes. Now, we haven't heard if Gabriel is actually going to be on the TV show. There is a character that will be coming later on in the season called Garrett, and they have promised that Garrett will actually be a hybrid of a couple of characters from the comic books, so that might be interesting. Garrett might actually be the pastor, Gabriel Stokes. Now, the storyline behind the preacher is that he has this church where he sought sanctuary. That word's very important throughout the book and might be important in the TV show. He sought sanctuary in a church. But when people came to him for help, he left them outside to die because he didn't want his food to be taken. Another issue of morality in this story. So he's a flawed character. So it's potential that Terminus might be the town where his church is located at. There is also a possibility this is where the Hunters are living at. Now, the Hunters are a very brutal group that are cannibals. They actually hunt the living, and they eat them. They eat their own children. Lizzie should fit in there. But they never tell you in the books where the Hunters are at. But we do know the Hunters are coming because a couple of the casting decisions for a couple people in the rest of the season are Hunters. We know this. The spoilers have already come out, and we know that the Hunters are coming. The Hunters come before they get to Virginia. So it's very likely that Terminus is where we will meet the Hunters. Now, there is also a possibility that this hybrid character might be a combination of Chris, who is the leader of the Hunters, of the cannibals, and Negan, who is a character that they brought up on The Talking Dead, and they never bring up anything on The Talking Dead without it actually coming up as an issue later, a couple episodes down the road. And we know that Negan has been released as one of the 2014 toys, official toys from McFarlane Toys for the Walking Dead line. So we know that he actually will be coming to pass eventually on the TV series. The producers have even said this. But they've said, don't expect him immediately after the prison. But then they go in and they hint that there's going to be a hybrid character, this Gareth character. So it would be very interesting to see if they combine Chris and Negan into a really sadistic killer. Negan is the leader of the Saviors, and their home base is called Sanctuary. And it's like this factory, cargo, warehouse type thing, which might be like a bus terminal. It could be a bus terminal in the TV show. But that's where they live, and they've surrounded the entire complex with zombies. They've impaled them on sticks to keep people out so that they're protected. And they're a religious cult. Now, throughout this season, there's been spoilers about the titles of the show and what that will mean. And they give these little cryptic messages, like, expect in this episode for the crew, the gang, to struggle with their faith. Faith and brutality are a recurring theme throughout this last section of the season. So it's possible that we might end up seeing Saviors and the Hunters at the same time. It'd be interesting if they did Team Rick encountering one of the groups, like the Saviors, and Team Carol encountering the other group, like the Hunters. Saviors, Hunters, and then it ends up being that they're going to all have to fight it out and head to Virginia. The last episode of the season is simply titled A. And Norman Reedus, who plays Daryl, says it's going to be a very ambitious episode. It's going to be really awesome. Most people think that A stands for Alexandria, which is the Alexandria Safe Zone. It's a key location in Virginia in the comic books where they go for safe haven. That's also where they end up meeting Negan. So, I mean, that's just my opinions on it. We'll see as the season goes on, but it's looking like it's going to be a very interesting end of the season.